Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Louder Now podcast. I'm your host, Jared Deal. Faith, mental health, recovery, addiction. These are the topics and subjects we tackle on this podcast. Really glad that you're here. And here is another episode of the podcast.
I guess my first question for you is where did your journey kind of start when it came to getting a diagnosis and then being on meds, and then I know that kind of led you to getting off the meds and then moving into territory that you're into now with kind of the whole. So I know that's a big question, but we'll just kind of jump right in like the diving board like this. So
That's okay.
yeah.
So, look, I had postnatal depression after my second son was born,
Okay.
and my doctor put me on Zoloft, and pretty much immediately I felt worse. So I was getting hand tremors and shakes. I was really forgetful. I was getting rapid heart rate, like really some nasty kind of reactions. And I stayed on the Zoloft for a year. And then I had to get my dosage weaned down because I just couldn't take it anymore. That was kind of my only time with meds.
Okay.
I really believe in treating root cause. And
Good.
so
Yeah.
after that episode, a whole lot of other medical stuff happened that got me to where I am today. And so now I look at depression and anxiety as symptoms. They're not the issue.
Right.
They are a symptom of an issue, and that root cause is what needs to be treated.
Okay.
So yeah, in a nutshell.
Yeah, and so for people listening who might not know what Zoloft is, I took Zoloft for a minute. My diagnosis has been bipolar, so antidepressants for me actually didn't do very well with, because bipolar is different. I mean, depression's a part of it. So Seroquel's kind of been my main med, and so but it's an antidepressant, right? It treats depression, and the theory is that, although there's a lot of debate, that it's the serotonin reuptake inhibitor is what it's called, which is where you're depressed because you have a chemical imbalance, and so this med is supposed to help balance you out, right? But what are the long-term effects of these things? And I think what you just described is a lot of people's experience, where they get on these things, and then when you Google the medicine, like maybe you guys shouldn't Google things, be careful. You find that there's 20 side effects with the thing that you have. A lot of other people's situation can be that they get on more than one thing, which then also makes things even more complicated sometimes. Kind of I'm having side effects, so then you take something to kind of balance that medicine out. Then you have the side effects of the second thing. So anyway,
It's kind of like a slippery slope of medication treating symptoms, but you're still not treating what caused the depression or the anxiety or whatever it is that you're treating. So by consistently taking medications to cover symptoms, you're still not treating the problem.
Yeah. So what do you think are, because I think a big thing is okay, what's the underlying issue? You could also say that for addiction too, right? Addiction sometimes is well, what's the thing that's causing you to go to the drug or the alcohol? So in your experience, what do you think? What are those underlying trauma, I'm guessing, for a lot of people?
Yeah, well, for depression, there's different biotypes. So there's actually 5 types of depression. And the first one is undermethylation and folate deficiency. So that's a liver issue.
Okay.
So when your liver cannot methylate the chemical messages coming through it, that can cause depression. So there's one. You've got hypermethylation. So too much methylation through the liver, which means you process things too quickly. So with nutrients and neurotransmitters, you just can't get a grasp on it. It's running too fast. Then there's copper overload, which typically comes from medications. So taking some medications can cause depression because you have copper overload. And then there's pyrrole disorder. A lot of people have pyrrole disorder. That causes depression. And of course, we have toxicity, which, toxic depression is a thing. So, when you're not in the sunlight, when you're not able to get nutrients and clean water,
Right.
and you're in synthetic foods and synthetic light and, synthetic medications, that can trigger depression. So, and then you also have others like essential fatty acid deficiency. That's more of a minor one. It's kind of a sneaky depression cause. But, these are what we really need to look at. Depression is not just one thing. So
Right.
where has it come from? What has triggered it? And, if we look at depression itself, it's actually the number one diagnosis and has been for decades. The number one reason why people go to see a doctor is depression. The second is actually anxiety.
Right.
And the number one prescribed medication is an SSRI, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
Right.
And so we have to look at, the growing trend here of let's medicate the symptom rather than why did this happen?
Right.
So traditional medicine, it's widely regarded as a serotonin receptor issue. As we've said, SSRIs are the treatment, basically. But we need to look at a more modern approach, and that is it a nutrient imbalance that's dominating the response here, causing this? Is it an imbalance of neurotransmitters, or is it a lack of neurotransmitters? And of course, a lot of those start in the gut. So is this a gut issue that's causing depression?
Right.
There's a lot there. We also need to look at, are we treating an imbalance, or are we, as I said a couple of times now, just treating the symptom of the imbalance?
Right.
So every case is completely different. And, you can't treat depression or anxiety properly without a full history. So whoever you're seeing, whether it's a natural doctor, a functional medicine doctor, a naturopath, a GP, whoever, if they don't ask for your history, they won't get this crucial information.
Right.
I think that's kind of where we need to be headed for this, is what is behind it? Is it the neurotransmitters? Serotonin is only one. Dopamine, norepinephrine, GABA, glutamate, they're all neurotransmitters. So, if we look at an imbalance, we can actually see through data collected that 90% of mental illness is a neurotransmitter imbalance.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's a lot of information, and I've heard some of what you're talking about. And the gut thing, I was just having this conversation with one of my close friends. Just this church group we go to on Monday nights, and we always have great conversations. And I was just looking up today, like some podcast on that. So I'm like, yeah, this keeps coming up. I don't got this anyway, the gut thing. But I was gonna say, like, in my experience, and I know not everybody listening has been to a psychiatrist probably, but my experience is that I think I think part of the challenge is, like, when you go to a psychiatrist, they don't really spend a whole lot of time looking at your history other than kind of asking you, like, hey, does this bipolar or depression run in your family? And I know that that's true in my case. So they just kind of they try to get like some idea of where you're coming from, but really at the end of the day, I mean, not to be cynical, but it's kind of like they just you know they're gonna point you towards medication. Like that's it. That's their job. The other stuff is if they do ask you about your health, that's kind of like a bonus, you know? You're like, oh, this guy's really nice. He's asking me, you know. So, and I think what happens with people is we go through these things that we call episodes, right? Maybe you don't sleep for like 3 weeks, or you're just so sad you don't know what to do, and we nobody likes to have pain or suffering, and so sort of the medication kind of alleviates that. It can, not always, and I feel like what you're saying um, kind of takes a little bit more work, you know, where it's like to get to the root of what's going on, that's harder to um, figure out than just like, hey, I'm trying to sleep, but give me, you know, trazodone for my sleep. Or is that, has that been your experience? Like when people come to you and the work that you do, is it take more time to kind of get to the root? But ultimately what you're saying is really good, because then they're going to figure it out kind of without medication.
Yeah, so look, it does take a little bit more time. People come to us and we have a 17-page intake form for
Oh, wow.
starters. We need to know everything. And
I
during
should do that.
yeah, during our call called our
Yeah.
root cause analysis, we go through that intake form
Yeah,
and we
that's
ask even
good.
more questions and we drill down. So, you know, things like, do you have a morning routine? Now, if someone comes to me and says, do you know what, I can't sleep at night, I'm taking melatonin and it's making things worse.
Right.
And I say, okay, what do you do in the mornings? Oh, I get up, lie in bed, check my phone for half an hour.
Right.
You know, curtains are still
Shoot, that's
pulled.
what
I
I
get
do.
up, have a coffee. This is what a lot of us do, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, we don't
if
really
I
have a
was,
routine. We're just like, I'm trying to get out of bed and not stay in bed. No. So just kidding. Sorry, keep going. Yeah, yeah.
so if I was to say my morning routine, okay, is I get up, I turn my alarm off on my phone, but I don't actually look at the rest of the phone. I don't unlock it. I just turn the alarm off.
Right.
And I throw some clothes on and I go outside and I walk in the sunrise because I wake up at sunrise pretty much every day anyway. I normally wake up before the alarm goes on my phone. So I go for a walk, might be half an hour, might be an hour in the sunrise, in the very early morning sun.
Right.
And then I come inside and I have a liter of water, structured water. And then I go and sit in my sauna for 50 minutes. Right. So this is almost a 2-hour morning routine. Why? Because while I'm in the early morning sun, the bacteria in my gut are being encouraged to make serotonin. And when they're encouraged to make serotonin, that then helps them make melatonin.
Mhm.
So by this 2-hour routine of, you know, centering myself, giving myself that time, hydrating really well, and making sure I'm getting that early morning sunlight and some fresh air, I know I'm going to sleep better that night.
Yeah.
So people say, why do you always put your alarm on if you wake up anyway? Because sometimes that sneaky morning, I don't quite wake up as the sun's rising.
Mhm.
But I know my body well enough now to know that this morning routine sets me up for a restful sleep. I don't need to take melatonin. I don't need to take sleeping tablets. You know, there are some nights I struggle to get to sleep. So what is causing that? I then look at that. I don't look at it as the struggle to get to sleep as being the problem.
Right.
So, you know, when we're talking depression and anxiety, we need to look at two areas, which is the liver and the gut. Now, I've mentioned the bacteria in the gut and I've mentioned the liver with methylation and how you make and use neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
That's kind of where focus needs to be. So when people come to me and they do this intake form, I'll see triggers of these things. I'll see there might be a gut issue. I'll see there might be a liver issue. And that's really where that information is key. So, you know, anxiety could be a hormonal issue.
Hmm.
You know, it might not be, it might be a stress response, but there's a whole lot of things. So that intake form will give me all the information I need to point
Yeah.
the person in the right direction.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I was joking a little bit, but now I'm like, I should do that. Yeah. I'm curious what's on that. So, and it's kind of like sometimes I think anything that has to do with like your health, right? Or even getting therapy. I've been recently like paying some money for a therapist because of my insurance, or whatever. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm paying for therapy. It's like your instinct usually is not to like pay to find out information about, how you're treating your body, or pay to read a book. And I mean, I know podcasts usually are free, but that's probably what we need to do is like do something like that. I was gonna say, what is the methylene thing? What is like the definition of that, or can you explain a little bit more of what that is?
Yeah, so there's several pathways that the liver uses to convert chemicals. So your liver is like a burning furnace 24/7. Every chemical process that goes on in your body, every thought, every feeling, every blood cell, everything you ingest, everything you inhale, the liver has to prioritize, categorize, determine, is this waste? Is this a nutrient? Is this good? Is this bad? It's working all the time.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So one of the pathways that the liver uses to do that is known as methylation. And some people over-methylate, some people under-methylate. So people that under-methylate, say they're taking an SSRI for depression,
Right.
that medication won't work very well for them because they just can't unlock what the medication's supposed to do. So these are people that end up upping their own dose or taking multiple medications because they're just not methylating it properly. On the flip side, there's over-methylators or hypermethylators. And so this is the other flip side, and that is they can take a medication on a very low dose and it's like a sledgehammer to them. So if you've got liver issues, then, methylation is the first one that we look at. There's others like glucuronidation, sulfonation. I mean, there's 6 of them, but methylation is the one that when we're looking at mental health, that's usually the one that's not working the way it should be.
Okay. Well, maybe when I'll email you or something. But what I'm curious is like, what has inspired you? Like, I know there's so much books on everything, and so now I'm like, what do you read? Because this is awesome. Yeah. But I was gonna say, and sounds obvious, right? But a challenge to is, the diet, right? Like what we eat. You're in Australia, I'm in America. I know we didn't say that at the beginning, but anyway. And it's like for us in America, I mean, there's so much diabetes, obesity. It's just we have so much stuff available to us that's so bad for us, right? Like, just on every corner, it's like fast food and ice cream, right? We know we got to take responsibility for what we eat, but it's a lot of this stuff having to do with the diet, right? Like obviously when we're putting bad things in our bodies, our liver is like working overtime or insulin and all these things. So are you putting people on like a really, really strict kind of food plan or?
No, look, I don't put people on a strict food plan.
Okay.
For the first 2 weeks, yes, I might, just to give their body a break. But the reality is, if I said to you, here's your diet, now you can't eat 90% of that anymore, it's not sustainable. And that
Right.
wouldn't be ethical for me to do that, because then you'd sit there going, what am I supposed to do? Eat cardboard? Like, this is
Mhm.
not cool. So we really need to look again, as I said, at the root cause. Why is it that you want to eat this much sugar? Why is it that you want to eat, these packaged foods? Is there something that you're getting out of that? Is it because it's convenient? Is it because there's a taste or a flavor that you're after? Is it a salt issue? Is it something to do with your adrenals and you're craving salty food? Really, what is the root cause of what's driving that diet? Now, here in Australia, we have pretty much the same food as you. So a lot of packaged foods, a lot of fried foods. And do you know what? Let's not talk in circles. This stuff's tasty.
You guys got the, what's it called? The Vegemite? Is that the spread?
Oh, yeah.
That goes on everything?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I went
it.
there in 8th grade. I told you that before we started recording. And it was actually the first time I saw the ocean, as a side note, which now I'm in California, so I'm like, ocean's like down the street. But I do remember going out to McDonald's and I was like, I want a Big Mac. And I was, and you guys have lamb. Well, you know this, right? And so the guy was like, I think this Big Mac's a lamb Big Mac. And I was like, honestly, it just tastes like a Big Mac. I can't really tell the difference. But I did have a lot of lamb when I was there, but I didn't try the Vegemite, I think because I thought it was probably nasty.
It is nasty.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, well, no, it's interesting. I mean, I think mental health and being in this space of the body and the mind, being connected and it's never just one thing, right? I mean, if you're always eating bad, of course, over time, your organs are going to start breaking down. Like, that's just seems like common sense. And I think there's the mystery is always like, we don't usually stop to make any changes until things get really bad. And then, back to the medicine thing, right? Then we could skip all of the stuff you're talking about and just be like, oh, it would be easier for me to just, take the Prozac or take the thing. And again, I'm not a doctor, you're not a doctor, but like, we're not saying don't take meds necessarily. I'm not necessarily ready to tell people that, but I'm just curious more as to being like, man, if I could go back in time for myself, which I can't do this, maybe if I would have had like someone like you saying like, okay, well, you're not sleeping, but let's try whatever. Shoot, I wish that I could change that. So that's awesome. I'm curious, like you said that there's 17 pages of this thing, and what is mold toxicity? What is that?
So a lot of people are exposed to mold. Unfortunately, when you have mold in your house and you clean it with bleach and then you paint over it, it's not gone. It's still there.
Oh, mold. Okay, like mold, like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you can be exposed to mold, and mold is the great survivor. Now, what it does is it pulls the strings in a lot of ways in your body. And one of the things it can do is play on past trauma responses.
Okay.
And exacerbate them, make them so much worse. So when you're dealing with mental health and you've got mold toxicity, it's going to look for that weakness. So it's going to make things, implode in your head, basically, so that something that felt bad before now feels really dire. Okay. And yeah, it's quite a nasty toxicity to have.
Yeah, I had one job one summer. My buddy had like a cleaning company, and one of the things was mold removal, which when it's like anyway, but hey, you got to pay the bills, so I had to wear a mask and cut holes in the wall, and no, it's awesome. Well, I mean, I'm really how long have you been doing this, like helping people?
In the business that I'm in now, Holistic Natural Health Australia, we've actually been operating now for 4 years. But prior to that, I was, in different forms of health and fitness. So I've kind of been on this road for a long time. But really, I love looking for root cause and just really helping people at that grassroots level.
Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, I guess back to the gut thing, like, I don't know what I mean by gut thing, because that's a very vague thing to say. is the well, actually don't know much about this. I'm just starting to get introduced to this, but can you explain that too? The is it called microbiome? Is that what that means?
Yeah. So
Okay,
every
right.
part of your body has a microbiome, but
Okay.
one of the most important is in your gut lining.
Okay.
So we've all heard the term leaky gut. It's kind of a thing that a lot of professionals just throw around the term, oh, yeah, you've got leaky gut.
Right.
That's not something to dismiss. That is
Right.
a big problem.
Okay.
So, when we're talking the gut, it's often referred to as the second brain. So obviously you have the brain in your head, you have the brain in your stomach, which is your gut.
Right.
And, we talk about this with things like gut feeling. You're walking down the street, you want to cross the road, get this gut feeling, don't cross the road, there's a bus coming.
Yeah, like
You look,
intuition.
you can't see it, but a second later, bus comes hurtling down the road. Your gut is trying to tell you stuff. It's trying to give you information. It gives you information as well when you eat things and you get an upset stomach. And you think, oh, I just had apple cider vinegar and that didn't go too well. But then the next day
Oh
you have
wow.
it again because you
Yeah,
think it
yeah.
was a one-off thing. Guess what?
Right.
It's not. So, you'd have to listen to your gut because it's just so super intelligent. And like I said, the bacteria, some of the good bacteria in the gut make those neurotransmitters.
Okay.
So we can't dismiss gut health.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like I said, I'm just starting to get into it. So here we are, summer 2022. So a year from now, we'll do another episode and talk about. Hopefully, I'll have more questions and things. Take what you said and I should do the assessment too, just out of curiosity, just to see like what's going on with me. No, I love it.
Definitely.
And I appreciate this conversation. And as I've done this podcast now the last few years, 120 episodes ish, like, yeah, everybody has a different perspective, but a lot of similar experiences of like, hey, I was going through a hard time. I tried the meds, but then, that's the hard part when you get put on the medication. Not that doctors don't care about people, but you're the experiment, right? So it's like if it goes good, you reap the benefits of that. But if it goes, into the space of like not working, like you were saying, right? You had tremors and all of the side effects that you Google. The person that suffers is you. I mean, the doctor doesn't suffer. So there's got to be a better way to help people get better and like heal is what I so what is the best way? Well, I wanted to ask you one. I usually kind of ask people this when I sort of close the conversation, but what advice do you give to people who are like maybe on the fence, they're struggling a lot? Could be suicidal thoughts, could be just their body breaking down. Like they know they probably need to get help, but maybe they're not willing to do that. What advice would you kind of give to that person?
Well, I don't want this to sound harsh at all, but it
Okay.
may do. But if you're on the fence or you're having suicidal thoughts, you really do need to create a support system. You need to have someone in your corner that you can talk to. Because, I've been there with suicidal thoughts. It's a
Right.
point in your life where you can't see your way out. So throw your life ring, grab someone that can help you. And, that's the first thing. When you're on the fence and, you're not sure about medications, or maybe you've had a bad experience with medications, or maybe you're on multiple medications, ask questions, take some responsibility. Ask your doctor, what is this doing? What are the side effects? Now, if they want to put you on that roller coaster of, side effects, medication, more side effects, more medication, ask the questions. You have the right. It is your right to be well. It is their job to inform you, not to dismiss you.
Yeah.
So like I said, it might sound a bit harsh, but you have the right. And where do you start? Look at what's causing it. What is the
Mhm.
root cause? And, we can help you with that at Holistic Natural Health Australia. And, we can refer out if we need to.
Yeah.
But really, what is causing this? Is this, a moment in time where everything seems to be getting on top of you? Or is this something that's been happening for a number of years? So, really looking at the history will help with that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say too. I don't think it's necessarily harsh. I think when you're struggling, um, and people are kind of maybe giving you advice or trying to, because you can't really make people really do anything, right? That's what's kind of hard about some of this stuff is um, acceptance is part of it, right? Ultimately, when you accept, you start getting help. So people can push you, but you got to be like, taking most of the steps. So, but yeah, I think sometimes with doctors, there's kind of like a fear, power, and control kind of complex. Like you can think, oh, I can't ask a bunch of questions because this guy's just. Maybe you're intimidated by the doctor because you don't really know much. So, I like what you said about just kind of asking a lot of questions, or not, or my encouragement to people would be like, don't be afraid to um, really get all the information that you need instead of just kind of assuming like, I only got 15 minutes with this guy.
Look, definitely don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated. They put their pants on one leg at a time as well. They're just
Yeah,
people.
right. Absolutely. Okay, so to get a hold of you, I have your website is www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. And I'll put all
Yep.
this in the notes.
And that's
Um,
holistic with a W.
yes. Okay, yes. And you're on Facebook and you're also on Instagram. So I'll put the links to that. And then is there any other way to get a hold of you or
The best way is the website,
okay.
holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. We actually have a services page there. So if you click on that, there'll be a book now tab. And what you want to book is a root cause analysis. It's complimentary.
Okay.
And once we see your booking on the calendar, we send you that intake form. And, then we can set up a Zoom call anywhere around the world or a phone call if you're in Australia, and we can go through that form. Now, on the website, you'll also find our podcast, A Magical Life, Health, Wealth, and Weight Loss. You'll find our blogs. You'll find
Okay.
links to all our socials, so Facebook and Instagram. And, there's something exciting going on Facebook at the moment, and that is we've been running giveaways.
Oh, cool.
So far we've given away an oil diffuser, we've given away a blender bottle. I think next we're doing a salt lamp. So there's always something really cool. And, we love freebies. So we give a freebie away on every podcast as well.
Awesome. I'm looking at your Facebook right now, and yeah, you looks like you got a lot of stuff going on in here. I see the giveaway thing too. So, all right. Well, I don't count, so I can't win anything because you're on my podcast, so that would be cheating. So,
No, you totally can't.
no,
And
I'm
guess what?
kidding.
I
I'm
don't
kidding.
choose the winner. So
All right.
I can't
Well,
influence this.
it does make me want to go back to Australia, though. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I've connected with a couple other people from Australia in the past too, and I'm like, now that's the cool thing with podcasts. You have all these friends, and like, America. If I do a road trip, I'm like, I just hang out with all the different special guests. But I really appreciate your time, and just I know we just thank you for reaching out. That's what's obviously awesome about um, Podmatch and all, and Facebook and the internet. It's like I don't know how you do it with your podcast, but it's like the majority of people I'm just meeting online. I have some people who are friends like in the flesh in California, but most people it's like I met you on Facebook. So it's always an honor to get to hear people's stories, and I'm just on the journey too. So the stuff that you're talking about is very interesting to me. Hopefully, other people find it helpful too, just because I spent a lot of time doing the meds and kind of doing other things, and that's not necessarily bad, but you can kind of ignore um, stuff that you're saying, which is like the body and other things that are going on that um, maybe we don't promote as much because it's just easier to get on meds, and we've already talked about that. But so anyway, thanks for just doing the work that you do. You being you. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, cool. All right, well, thanks, Magic. I
Okay.
appreciate you. Have a good rest of your day. Okay.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. What would help me the most is if you go to Apple Podcast and leave a rating and a review. I'll put the link to that's in the notes. Also, the end of show notes have some resources. There's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and there's some other resources that I'll have in the bottom section for end of show notes. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you to my special guest for being here today, and we'll see you next time.